And it is drastic and two gone. He runs some struggles on the fastball.
Why do MLB players use wooden bats over metal bats? This is Sports Simplified, and the reason is quite simple: rules and tradition. Now, starting off with the rules, the MLB rule on the bat states that a bat must be a round, smooth stick, no more than 2.61 inches in its diameter at its thickest point, and no more than 42 inches long. The rule also states that the bat must be one solid piece of wood. Now, another part of the rule is more cosmetics, but they're pretty strict on how the bat looks. It has to be a more natural wood color or anything calm or quiet, nothing too, I guess you could say, far out there, with the exceptions on certain parts of the year. For example, on Mother's Day, players are allowed to use pink bats. On Father's Day, players are allowed to use blue bats. And during Players Weekend, which was this past weekend, they're pretty much allowed to do whatever they want. But Players Weekend is not every year. I think this is the first Players Weekend in quite a few years, but you see some people using a pencil bat or some other stuff that are interesting color schemes. But again, for the rest of the year, the rules are a lot more strict. Now, as far as the wooden bats in baseball, they are pretty much all made of a birch or maple composite, as I guess those are the two best types of wood for bats. Now, it's changed over the history, but that's currently what they found is the best. And you could say of the best bats in baseball are both Chandler maple bats for Shohei Ohtani and Aaron Judge. Now, both are catered to their specifics, but both are made by the same manufacturer and both are of a maple composite. So make of that what you will, and if you want to get the best bat in baseball, I guess you got to go now to Chandler Bats. But there's a ton of baseball brands or for bats in baseball anyways. Like, you could go historic with Louisville Slugger, or a previous really popular one was Marucci, Albert Pujols, that was his bat. Or now Victus and some other brands are still in the mix. I think even Rawlings might still make bats. But the Major League Pros now, I guess, are more switching over to Chandler bats. Now, one might ask, why doesn't MLB change the rules so that metal bats are allowed in baseball? And a reason for that is that it would lead to a dramatic competitive imbalance between pitching and hitting, because metal bats are a lot more forgiving than wooden bats, meaning that metal bats give a lot more consistent contact for hitters than a wooden bat does. For an example, is that wooden bats break if they hit the ball in a certain spot. Metal bats don't, and as a result, that would lead to a dramatic increase in batting averages, which would thus lead to more runs and a higher base ERA. I would guess a Cy Young comparable ERA in that hypothetical would be around a 4 or 4.5. Something ridiculous because runs would be so plentiful, but that would result in a huge competitive imbalance that really would make baseball unrecognizable to its current comparative state. In my mind, a good comparison would be to give the top wide receivers in the NFL all sticky substances on their gloves so that way they could catch every ball. What that would basically do is that would make it impossible for defenders to do anything. Let's say Tyreek Hill just has to stick his hand out and he has sticky substances on his hand and it catches the ball no matter what. He doesn't even have to really do anything to catch it. What that would do is that would dramatically increase the completion percentage for quarterbacks and also for wide receivers, and it would also lead to more scoring, which thus would be a greater competitive imbalance than it already is. Now, unlike baseball, the NFL already has kind of a competitive imbalance between offense and defense. Baseball, it's a little bit less, but the point is that it would be dramatically ridiculous and it would be way more scoring, which is cool, but the competitive imbalance would be ridiculous, and at that point, who wants to play defense anymore? Because you already have to guard Tyreek Hill, but then now you have to guard him with a sticky glove that'll catch any ball in his vicinity. What's the point? Now, arguably a more important reason why to keep metal bats out of baseball is tradition. Wooden bats in baseball are synonymous to the sport as a whole as the leather glove, the baseball itself, or even a hot dog or Cracker Jacks. Wooden bats, the sound, the look, the aesthetic, even the way they break and how that has a result is all synonymous to the core historic value of the current game of baseball. And like baseball, instead of most sports, baseball is a huge stickler on tradition and keeping old traditional rules in the game. So that's one reason why baseball will probably never allow metal bats, unless I could see a world where batters couldn't really hit anymore for whatever reason. The highest average might be 150 or 200. And then in that instance, if offense further goes under, then you could see a shift to metal bats. But They're major league hitters, they're the best hitters in the world. You'll probably never see a pitcher get that much of an advantage unless if they were allowed to use like spider tack, which they're not. So therefore, I don't see that ever really happening. Comment below if you think wooden bats should be the only bats allowed in the game, or if you think metal bats would be an interesting change. And as always, like and follow for more.